You're going to get exhausted doing it too. And I know, because I want you on there. I need you to answer questions for the public.
I'm just thinking, is
right?
it easier for you to sit down and film it?
Well,
Unless it ruins the quality.
I feel lazy. Okay, I feel kind of lazy.
Here we go.
Yeah, no, I don't think I can. Sorry.
Oh. Well, if you need a break.
Yeah, if anybody feels like grabbing it at some point, that would be awesome.
Right now we are at...
Okay, Dawn, I think we're on.
Okay. Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for coming today. I'm Don Grundmann. I'm the founder and director of the National Straight Pride Coalition, and this is actually film number 5 in a series that we're having for 2020 of what we're doing and why. We had many people who wanted to come today, some whose cars broke down and couldn't make it. So, for those of us who can join us on Facebook now where we're filming, hello, hi, and so we have a lot of people here with us in spirit. And there are a zillion things I could state, and for some of you, you might already know the reasons and rationales about what we do. But to reiterate, one of the founding ideas behind the Straight Pride Coalition is that we see our culture deteriorating in countless different ways. There are attacks on our culture, Christian culture specifically, along many different aspects. You'll see toxic masculinity, you'll see the promotion of abortion, you see the promotion of sodomy and homosexuality, cultural degeneration of our nation. And the Straight Pride Coalition is founded to address all of those seem different: toxic masculinity, abortion, and homosexuality, just 3 out of many topics. On the surface, they appear different. I would present to you that they have a common root, a common cause. And that cause is because everything that we see around us in our culture right now, to myself, it boils down to a religious war with a cultural veneer. And that religious war is between Christianity on one side, with Christ as the standard bearer, versus what I refer to as Satanism/humanism on the other side, with the enemy of God, a term I use for Lucifer or Satan. And their standard bearer is known as the Marquis de Sade, is one of their standard bearers, if you've heard of that gentleman. Historically, he was an evil person many centuries ago, but his spirit, per se, lives on in that movement. One of the ways it lives on is that we see the so-called LGBT movement, which I refer to as the LGBT war machine, because this is a war to supplant, destroy Christian foundations of our culture, and replace them with their opposite. We see that in countless different ways. One example is that we see it with the so-called transgender movement, and essentially that boils down to, you have the Christianity says we're created beings. I'm a created being. God made me. I didn't come from the ooze and the slime. I didn't come over 1 billion years. God created me, boom, like that. And he created all of us and our world and our universe. And so we reject the religion of evolution in that sense, which is so-called science, but it's a religion masquerading as science. But in that sense, we have Christianity, which says God created man and woman. But the opposite says that there's no God. We create ourselves, and since we evolved from the slime, we can make ourselves into anything we want, such as if a male wants to say, I'm a female, or the reverse. And so the extent of that is a cultural attack against us to break down our culture. Is now we see it in the schools. It's being taught to the children at the youngest possible age to break them, and because the powers that we're opposing know that if they can break a child in their spirit, we're talking about a spiritual soul war. If they can break that child at the youngest age, they've got him. And I draw that idea from many years ago. I first started to see the light regarding the attack of the sodomite culture upon our nation. I heard that there was a group of child molesters marching at the sodomite parade in San Francisco. Mm-hmm. And they were called the North American Man-Boy Love Association. And their motto is sex before 8 or it's too late. And the idea behind that motto is they know that the earlier they can break the child, that child can never recover. So it's extremely important for our enemies to attack children at the youngest age. And I didn't believe it at the time. I grabbed a camera. I went over to film the sodomite parade, and I was going to find out, are they there or are they not? I found them, and I filmed it for about 5 years consecutively. They march right in the parade. And so, just as a segue that you'll be told by our enemies, oh, they have no connection to us at all. And we disavow them. That's not true at all. That is a cover story. And that cover story, it leads us to this day. We have, if you've ever heard of what are called drag queen story hours. And essentially, this all comes back to what's called social engineering. We're being trained like lab rats to obey and to discard our Christian culture and to replace it as acceptable, as normal, the culture of our enemy. If you'll see on the flyer, the Straight Pride Coalition, one of our, at the very bottom, our motto is normal, natural, healthy, sane. And our response is that if I've been asked by a reporter, are you saying that your opponents are the opposite? Yes. And so we represent sanity. We're standing for sanity. We're standing for normality, for what's natural as compared to unnatural. And so this is a cultural value which can be overcome. And let me, there's so many things to say, but let me draw back into our current idea, which is relevant for the so-called COVID-19, which is so-called afflicting us, because how we're dealing with this bug, theoretical bug, is the way we're being trained also in social engineering for what we're addressing on this flyer. And I want to cover this, that when you see us, we have the mask requirement and such things. There's a philosophical basis behind this. And that has to do in medicine what's called germ theory by a gentleman, Louis Pasteur, who was a French gentleman in the late 1800s. And the idea behind that is there are germs everywhere which attack us, and we have. So there's a germ around the corner, and if you want to say, I'll go that way, and the bug can get you over there. We're always worried about bugs. Contradicting theory in physiology and medicine called the terrain theory. And that is that if we have a pile of garbage out in the street, the rats will come up and it's great rat food, the rats love it. And so that's a particular part of the terrain. If you change the terrain, get rid of the garbage, the rats come up, no food, they're gone. So the idea is that in the bugs, we don't, in the terrain theory, we don't need to worry about bugs, and it's useless anyway, because if we build our terrain, our health of our body, our immune system, which is created beings the Creator gave us, we don't have to worry about bugs. And as an example, it doesn't matter to me if you all have a bug right now, because my immune system, which my Creator gave me, will defeat that bug. And that's an idea of terrain.
Amen. Versus
being afraid of the bug with germ theory. And I would present to you, we are being socially engineered to accept germ theory, that if the day before the shutdown started here in California, we've all been assaulted by bugs for our entire lives. And our immune system is constantly fighting about bugs 24/7 every day. Now, if they suddenly said, okay, it's over, well, they don't know that, because this particular bug can be anywhere, and you're always looking for something you can't see. You know, so theoretically, they can say, well, to protect you all, socially engineering you, you have to wear your mask permanently. And so they can say, we're going to be in this for fill in the blank, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years, or we'll be into it until, with my psychic powers, I can say we will be in it. If we have elected President Biden, this will all stop on November 4th. And if we don't, if President Trump is elected, then it will go on to sometime in 2024. Because this goes beyond medicine. As I was told by a seminar by one of I'm a doctor of chiropractic, so one of our lead researchers in our field told me that the British medical journal, which is known as Lancet, which is world-renowned, is a famous medical study book. They publish reports from all over the world. So if you get your work published in Lancet, that's an accomplishment. They actually came out with an editorial saying that President Trump needs to be taken from office, however it was worded. So think about that. This is a medical journal which is taking scholarly articles, well-researched articles, from around the world. They're at the premier of the medical journal field. And suddenly they shift gears and put a political article out, which is totally off base from what their whole purpose of their organization has always been. So this indicates the powers that are manipulating these behind the scenes. This is a powerful organization, well renowned throughout the world, which can be influenced. Now supposedly they retracted it later. Maybe they got enough heat to retract it. But to influence that, it'd be like if I walked into the United Nations and I said, hey, let's have Don Grundmann week. Hey, you got it. And so it'd be, do I have the power to? No, they would toss me out. They'd say, get out of here. So in the same way that we don't have the power to do these things, there is a power which has the ability to shift our culture and to lead us toward having a panic attack where we're now being trained, and we're actually being trained to, because you'll never hear a story on the TV, and I predict you haven't and you won't, which says that, thank you, now here's our reporter, this is Channel 1 News. Here's our reporter, Susie Smith, and she's interviewing Dr. John James on how to improve your immune system. Go ahead, Susie. You'll never hear that. Because all is panic. They're affected, even though the death rate is similar to the common flu. And so, and even with the Spanish flu, which killed a fantastic amount of people early in the 1900s, that was largely due to lack of sanitation,
Yes.
and poor immune system, poor nutrition. And so now we can fight back. We don't have to suffer those tremendous casualties, but that is all eliminated. One of the keys that my instructor said at the recent seminar I went to last weekend was that sugar, the more sugar you eat, it lowers your immune system. So to improve your immune system, you want to avoid sugar as much as you can. But are the TV shows going to say that when the next commercial is for Dr. Pepper or whatever? There's no way they're going to do that. Or vitamin D. Vitamin D, for a fantastic amount of diseases, if you have a low vitamin D in your bloodstream, that weakens your immune system and allows you to be attacked by many other diseases above and beyond this bug. So one of the ways to improve get more ammo to fight back with your immune system is to improve your vitamin D level. But of course that allows not only supplementation, but going outside in fresh air and exercise. But what are we told contrary to that? Stay home, bunker up. And so the idea is that this bug, we have to be always afraid of this bug. Again, the germ theory as compared to terrain theory. You go to the gym, you work out. When you heat up, every degree temperature that you rise up, your immune system functions 100% exponentially better, like 100 times faster. So you're sending the bugs to find out the invaders of your body. Your immune system is finding the invaders and taking care of them. But we're being contracted in our lifestyle, which weakens our immune system, makes us more susceptible. And so what is the idea? I present to you that the idea is not to protect us. On this, there's a surface veneer that, oh, this is for your own good. And you'll see these signs on the freeway. Save lives by wearing a mask, or 6 foot distance so the bug comes out of your mouth and it just can't quite get to the next guy because they're 6 feet and 1 inch away. So, and you're supposed to wear a mask all the time. When you wear the mask, it cuts down on your oxygen supply, and you can have a measured oxygen supply in your body by what's called an oximeter, which is less by wearing the mask. You're rebreathing your CO2. That lowers your immune system right there. That's right. So I present to you the idea is that you are not being told these things for your health. You're being told because we're lab rats. We're being trained for something which is next coming up the pike. I heard a former disease control expert with the CDC. She made a video, and she was saying that the government knows that, for instance, if they want to take away our guns, there'll be 3% who will fight back with no questions asked. There'll be 7% who will be a little wavery, but they'll fight back. But there'll be 90% who will say, okay, you got it. And so the government is counting on that. All they have to do is take care of mainly the 3%. And so this is, we're being socially engineered. And so in the same way we're being socially engineered relevant to the virus, I present to you that the sodomites, they are changing the terrain in our country. They are building the garbage piles. When you see a sodomite parade, that is a cultural garbage pile. And that's where these rats will come in, and they can multiply. It gives rat food for everyone, and because it's socially engineering people, especially children, to accept this degeneracy. And that's degeneracy across the board. So we're saying, and everything that we're celebrating is the complete opposite of sodomite parades. So we're saying it's okay to be a man. Where in reverse, in the social engineering in our colleges, it's like women's study courses. It teaches that all men, without question, are rapists. It teaches that the second you're born, like if you're especially a white boy is not only a racist, but you're automatically evil just by being Caucasian. And as I've said before, Caucasians now are under attack, especially Christian Caucasians, that we are the cause of everything bad in the past, everything bad now, and everything that's going to go bad in the future. So, and we are opposed, we are attacked by saying we're racist, and so you have organizations such as Black Lives Matter comes up. If you'll notice, I made a point here, all lives matter.
That's right.
And because there have literally been people who are fired for saying that all lives matter. And so there is a cultural backlash because that is unacceptable. And people don't know, for instance, Black Lives Matter. It's actually a fantastically evil organization. You go to their website, they're anti-family. It was founded by 3 lesbians. It's anti-men. They're communists. They come right out with it and say, we're Marxists. And since I'm speaking for Facebook people, find out what Marx said about blacks. The founders of Black Lives Matter, who come right out and say, yeah, we're trained to Marxists. Marx said that blacks were degenerate. What's going on? They're a hero. The church of Marx, which they go to, calls them degenerates. So that's why I say there's something beyond this. And just to let you know, here we have a very modest means, to put it mildly, but Black Lives Matter, they've had companies throw money at them to the tune where they've gotten more than $500 million of donations. So it pays in that sense to be a communist. So what I'm leading to is that the powers that be are arrayed to produce this social engineering, which is to train us to eradicate Christianity. Christianity is only going to be accepted if, and for those of you, like the King James Bible, our opponents have made the Queen James Bible. And they literally eliminate, they just drop any reference which is against homosexuality, just eliminate it. And that takes care of the problem. So this is a fantastically thorough social engineering. They haven't missed a beat. And so we're coming up and we're saying in this March, we're going to challenge everything they do. And the wording that I have here in Dear Citizen, most people don't know that Planned Parenthood, the cover story, like I say there's a cover story and a real story, just like the virus. Planned Parenthood, there was a cover story, we're here to help women's health, we care about women. The real story is that you have to go back to the beginning. Charles Darwin, roughly the beginning. Charles Darwin, if you think of what was the book that Charles Darwin wrote. Okay, that is not correct. The real reason is so the answer that you just mentioned, which the vast majority of people think of, The Origin of Species. They don't know that the real title of that book was On the Origin of Species and the Preservation of Favored Races. That's the real title.
Yes.
So what Darwin, his so-called science of Darwinism and evolution, it's really a religious belief crouched behind science, which says that at the time, Darwin was saying there's superior and inferior. Evolution makes you superior. So the people who were behind Darwin, Caucasians, rich Caucasians, who were behind the British Empire, who could rule over and put other people in slavery, they believed that they were genetically superior. And so therefore Darwin produces the science which confirms that, hey, evolution made us the best. And these are the guys who, well, they're less. They're inferior by definition. And so the problem was that there was Thomas Malthus, who was part of the British Empire. He was Parson Malthus. He wrote a book. Essentially, it was his belief is Malthusianism. And that belief is that if we split this table in half, the inferiors are over there and the superiors are over here. It's filled with food. So in the natural order of things, according to this belief by Parson Malthus, all the inferiors, they're too dumb to figure out how to grow food or anything. All they do is eat and breed, like rabbits. They will, so therefore automatically they will eat up all the food on that side of the table, and then they'll come over and eat this side. And so the superior people over here had a problem of how do we protect our superior genes from the inferiors overrunning us? That's where you come in. That's where years later they started eugenics, race science, to justify their superiority and the inferiority of their enemies, which included not only what we call now people of color, but it included at that time the Irish. At the turn of the century, like late 1800s, there were signs in the Boston parks, no dogs or Irish allowed. And so, because the Irish were Catholic, they loved big families, and so the superiors, the genetic superiors, anti-Christian, they hated that Catholicism. They hate that idea of families and children. So the Irish were dumped in with the enemies on that side. So how do you stop them? You have eugenics, race science. You have programs for eugenics which stop in various ways the proliferation per se of your enemies. And that spreads out to many different things. If you've ever heard the Tuskegee experiments on black flyers, the experiments at Tuskegee to inject them with syphilis to see what their reaction was, and without their knowledge. And so the idea, but the reason they were chosen is because they're inferiors, they're expendable. They're like expendable or lab rats. So it carries up to Planned Parenthood. Margaret Sanger would love, she hated the Irish, she hated the Catholics, she hated large families, she hated all that. So how do you deal with that? You promote abortion. Under the cover story, we're here to help women. But the real story is that she called, in her own words, not mine, in her own words, she had, it's called, her famous book, she called it Black's Human Weeds, in her own words. And they also had a program, one of her quotes was that we don't want the word to get out that we. So how do you solve that problem? You solve it by what they call, in their own words, and this is an action program which goes to this day, which our parade is addressing. It's called the Negro Project. So if Dan was, if he was a black gentleman and he looks out at his community and says, you know, these guys, they're trying to do a job on us, they want to kill us. So he goes out and he starts to alert fellow members of his community. And I am recruited by Planned Parenthood in the Negro Project, and I come up and say, "Oh, hey Dan, you know, you got it all wrong. They're really our friends. I'll take you out to dinner. Let's discuss it." So my job in the Negro Project is to neutralize him, to stop him from being uppity per se, and alerting the rest of the community where they would fight back. And that's a fantastically successful program, which I present to you, because the lead member of the greatest student of the Negro Project, you know him as Barack Obama, because he is a defender of the black community, of Planned Parenthood, no matter how many they've killed. And so, as I say in this flyer, If blackgenocide.org has documented, and this is the key for our event upcoming, blackgenocide.org, founded by a black minister, Reverend Childress, back in New Jersey. He's documented that Planned Parenthood has killed more than 20 million blacks. Think of that, 20 million. And so, a fantastic number. They're the greatest killer of blacks in the history of our nation. They're essentially lynching them in the womb. And so, only the original Islam worldwide has killed more blacks than Planned Parenthood has killed in America. So the idea behind this is we're saying that, and it's true, Planned Parenthood was found, we hear so much about white superiority and white supremacy. That's exactly what Planned Parenthood was founded on. To promote white superiority and white supremacy of these elites against what they call the inferiors. So the idea of this march is we're saying, okay, yeah, here's white supremacy, it's right here, it's in the phone book, Planned Parenthood. So if we're going to stop, if you're going to stop white superiority, we stop Planned Parenthood. So that's why you'll see that dear citizen down there, because we're challenging the belief structure. There's a fantastic power structure behind Planned Parenthood, that they're authorized to exist in all the cities and to attack the black community, and no one challenges them. Even when in recent years you'll hear reports about how they sell baby parts, how they kill the babies while they're alive to be able to harvest the parts for selling. And so what happens, the people who reported those are now under attack and being threatened with jail and $1 million fines. So that gives you an idea of the power that we're dealing with. So we are essentially, we're like a little David with our slingshot, whipping it up. And the idea is that this is our challenge to Goliath. That if we build up enough momentum, spin it around, boom, and we can go bam and get them. So the idea is a modest beginning, but it can have the potential for destroying these people. And it can have the potential for destroying our enemies in the November election. And I'll put it, I'm chairman of the Constitution Party in California. But I recognize that, to me, the Democratic Party, with their beliefs, they are the political embodiment of this Satanism/humanism, because they believe in shredding children up to the second before birth, or jabbing them in the back of the head and sucking their brains out, and then after birth they believe in infanticide. They don't have a qualm about it. They support everything about sodomites. They support transgenders, and I predict to you that this is just the beginning. When you see transgender, it's only a matter of time until we have uterine transplants for dudes who want to be dudettes and want to have supposedly the civil right to carry a child. And so we started transgender. The next is trans species. And then because there'll be some guy who goes to your child's class, will show and tell and say, "Hi, I'm Sammy the Snake," or "I'm Steve the Squirrel," and that'll be totally acceptable to teach your children that maybe they're another species. Just if they can be taught that they're another gender, why not another species? Or after that, I'm not kidding. This is already beginning to happen. Transplant. Why not? I'm Mike from Mars. And maybe you're from Mars. How do you know you're not? So this is a pathology, a fantastic sickness, which we're being socially engineered to accept, to where when even transgenders, they're brought into the schools, and you have the school structure, the principals and the teachers who are promoting parachuting these kids in to, say, kindergarten, and then any child who, and I've seen this years ago, any child who has any question of what's happening to the children. I had a neighbor years ago. He sent his daughter comes back from school. She brings a letter that next week was going to be gender celebration week, whatever. He knew exactly what was going to go on. He pulled her from the school immediately. I went to the meeting the following week. I got there late, but when I walked in the door of this group, there were groups, like 5 different groups that were on the tables. They came back into a general assembly, and I found that what they had been doing was each was assigned, like, okay, kindergarten, first grade. You guys take second, third. You guys take fourth grade. each table had a question. The had answer was, what do you do if any child in your grades that you're looking at says anything which is anti-sodomite, to challenge the sodomites at all? So this was a focus group of parents who would monitor the children to watch for any sign of any disagreement, and then they can take care of that, snuff it out right now. And this was at least 5 years ago. So this is, and this takes a lot. They had organizational materials paid for by particular organizations to teach these people. So this is training of the children, social engineering at the earliest ages, and it's going on throughout the country. And so the idea is that if we don't challenge this, if we don't stop it, what we, how many years ago would we have thought that, oh, sodomite marriage, that'll never happen. So much for that idea. Would we have ever imagined transgenders? No. There's so many things that we can't imagine, but our enemies can. And our enemies are not only imagining that, but they're planning for it. They're counting on it. And part of it, they're counting on us not imagining it. They're counting on us sitting on our hands. Because unfortunately, I protested many years in fighting sodomite marriage per se, and countless demonstrations. And one of the things my friends virtually always said at the end of the demonstration was, "Where were the pastors?" Because the vast majority of pastors are AWOL. They've given up, and in fact, we've been attacked. As I told our members last year when we first started, before we had our event, I expected more pastors to be outside protesting us than who would join us on our side of the aisle, and that's exactly what happened. We had multiple pastors per se who made videos. I think one put out a full page ad in the newspaper, or a half page ad, whatever, saying that we were so-called racist. So we're up against it. As far as our enemies. So our merry band here, I present to you that we are a vanguard of what can actually stop these people by what seems impossible is possible. Because we've got the trump card per se, we've got the Creator on our side, but we have to be obedient to the callings of the Creator, and we have to be able to step out in the battlefield. And so one of the things that we're presenting here is that we're going to say, for anybody who opposes us this time, oh, okay, so you support black genocide. We're marching against black genocide. We're working to stop Planned Parenthood which is the fountainhead of black genocide. So, and just like last year, we were called, right out of the bat, we were called racist. Which is exactly what will happen to us this year. And the people who oppose us are the people who are the real racists, because they're supporting the white supremacy, the real white supremacy, not the fake one you hear in the media, but the real white supremacy springing back from Darwin and all that movement, all that power. So what we're doing is we're striking at the cultural root of all those things which we're addressing. We're celebrating a celebration of life. And in contrast, I present to you that our opponents have a celebration of death. They have a culture of death. And so they're trying to train our children, train our society to accept that culture of death. So we're saying, no, we're going to celebrate life. And that life is a religious belief, Christianity, versus its opponents. So it's a very cut and dry thing, actually. And so that's why I present to you that this can be a cultural change as we spread out, as we spread the word and encourage people to join us in different cities. For instance, at the top it says National Straight Pride Coalition. But that National Straight Pride Coalition breaks down into statewide, so we're the California Straight Pride Coalition, and this is the Stanislaus County Straight Pride Coalition subdivision. So the idea is every state has their coalition, every county and every state has their subdivision, so that we present the opposite to what the sodomites are presenting. We say that drag queen story hours, we go out and attack them. We say that they are a direct descendant and a direct connection between them and NAMBLA, and they need to be stopped. And they've been put back on their heels a certain bit, because now they're going online a lot. They intend to still continue to after the election, especially they'll go back to attacking in the field. But they want to bring in, one of the ideas is they bring in children to these events, drag queen story hours, who will, the cover story again, oh, we're just teaching them to read, so they have a love of reading. The real thing which happens all over them, sensitize them to have perverts touching them, and so it's to break down the children, and then you spread those children out, and then they teach other children, and so the poison spreads and spreads and spreads. So we are the antidote, and so that's why this movement is about. And also, I want to address one other thing. We are the Straight Pride Coalition, okay? And now I recognize that in Christianity, pride, the Creator doesn't like pride, okay? That's a bad thing. But this is a, think of it, this is a strategic use of the word. If we had if we called this we're going to have a love seminar. And we go to our sodomite enemies and say, oh, we're going to have a love seminar to challenge you. And they could say, oh, I'm sorry, I was yawning so much. What were you saying? And so it wouldn't make a dent in them. But when we say we're having a straight pride, they snap to right now. How
dare you?
What? Yeah, we're challenging them right on their field of activity. You know, and just like when they build the community structures, you think of it, the Boy Scouts. What used to be the Boy Scouts?
Yeah.
The Boy Scouts were represented real young men, becoming men, ideally. And that was intolerable to the enemies, to our enemies. They couldn't stand that because they could have went out and made a sodomite Boy Scouts and say, hey, this is our Scouts group. But the real Boy Scouts and real men would always be a thorn in their side because we would be able to say, these are the real guys, these are the real boys, and these are the sick boys. So they couldn't allow the real Boy Scouts to continue to exist. So they infiltrated their board. You get a lot of money poured in to overturn them. And you fast forward to our day and they're destroyed. So they cannot allow normality to exist. They have to destroy it. So we're coming back on the field of battle and we're saying, what we're prideful of, what we support are all these things. Masculinity, femininity, children born and unborn.
God's created order.
Yes, God's created order. So we're saying we represent normal, natural, healthy, sane, which is the opposite. We're challenging them right on their field because they've trained, social engineered our country to think of pride parades. Oh, that's all fun and games and all that, instead of being sick like it is.
Exactly.
So in order to defeat them, we have to show that we have to say, no, you are not whole, you are sick. And we have the antidote. And unless you challenge that directly, that sickness, they'll continue on, and we won't defeat them. So that's one of the reasons that we're doing here is we're presenting everything as normal, natural, healthy, sane, to hammer that in as part of our battle cry. So that's why I hope you can join us on the 29th, Saturday at 12. We're going to have some wonderful speakers like Reverend Jesse Peterson. He's going to be there speaking to us at that event. We're going to have speakers before the event. We're going to go down and march and meet our enemies in front of Planned Parenthood and have our speakers. But it's the equivalent of taking a flag, and we plant our flag there. And so instead of our flag, for instance, in a related idea, if you have a mosque built, a mosque is a representation, we think of it as just a church. But it's actually a battlefield establishment for an anti-Christian religion. And because the leader, it's a war. A church here, that is like their ground. We're accepting more sodomite, everything under the sun, until such as Drag Queen Story. You get TV stories on that, shows on that of how wonderful drag race they call it. It's to indoctrinate our culture with that, and to indoctrinate. All the TV shows now are being indoctrinated with sodomite characters, And even children's show, even, what is it, Sesame Street?
Yeah, loaded.
Characters in Sesame Street. Characters in children's cartoons. The Disney. Disney is gone. And because Walt Disney would never have dreamed that his company would put out what they do now. But it's been overtaken at the corporate level, and it's been changed. So it's a cultural warfare. And so our side is getting the tar knocked out of them, essentially. So this is a standard to say we're going to carry the flag. Actually, well, when you see that bottom, when you see the emblem on the bottom, that is our flag. I left the flag out in the car.
Oh, you did? Okay.
But we actually were reclaiming the rainbow. They've stolen the rainbow. We put the cross, God's promise in this. And sodomite flags have, I forget the theological reason, but there is a theological reason why they only have 6 colors. A real rainbow has 7. And so we have the 7 colors. We're reclaiming everything. We put the emblem of the family below it. So, because language is a weapon of war. And that's why in war, you won't hear me say the word gay, unless it's to say, to explain why you don't use the word gay, or should avoid it. And that's because gay is a marketing, advertising, social engineering term. The real word is sodomite. But if you repeat gay, if we're hammered gay, gay all day long, all newscasts, top to bottom, 24/7, we forget about the real meaning of it, or real activity, and especially what they really do, and we accept their definition of them, which is, happy, free thinkers, all that stuff, as compared to slaves. So this is a very comprehensive war, which includes not only a physical standing in front of Planned Parenthood to make a statement, but it also includes the language that we use every day, that we don't get socially engineered like lab rats to repeat their language. And so that's why I encourage you all to spread the word to everyone else and join the fight in this, and our Facebook people included. And did anybody have any questions? Or did I explain everything perfectly? Well, so it is war. It is war, and as we were talking about earlier, there are potentially people who could join us across the country to have straight pride marches, but that's been somewhat of, there are people who have contacted me and said they really appreciated what we did last year, but in discussions with them, I've advised them to hold off on doing anything, march in their area. I would love to see the, again, chapters, marches through the whole country. But our current climate has gone so downhill that some people have contacted me, they're in danger that if they did anything, they could be fired from their job. The hammer will be dropped on them by the powers that be. They have to protect and feed their family. So I said, I can appreciate that, totally. So we're behind the 8 ball. Because imagine, go in a time machine back 50 years, would we be in the spot where we are now? Never. Where we have this insanity going on, where we even need an organization, we even need to even think of an organization of what we're talking about doing. It would have been impossible, but our enemies, they've been busy for little termites, they've been chewing away, and now the cultural floor below us, we step and our foot goes through. So because they've chewed out the underpinnings, and in that sense, we could be in a cultural house where the whole thing will fall around us because they're turning the whole thing to sawdust while we're not realizing we're sitting on our posteriors and we're not doing anything. So this is an idea to carry this battle to the country. And so on that day, ideally I'd like to have everybody with flags and all kinds of signs, and I'm going to make plenty of signs. If you were to Google me on the internet, you'll see that many demonstrations I have big signs. So the big signs will be like 3 foot by 4 foot, double-sided signs of which we need to raise up. They're in telescoping poop holes because our enemies will come to try to block our signs. And so they will say things like Planned Parenthood kills blacks. Planned Parenthood is racist, so we want to spread that message. And this is the 2nd annual. So we're going to keep hammering away. Hammer, 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 hammer. And the day after our event, we'll just keep on going. So that's a broad perspective of it with some of the lower nuances of what we're doing. But it's a long-term battle. But if we don't do this, then this will be a fantastic tragedy, because I look here, this is like a rolled-up copy of the I don't know,
Constitution.
Yes. It'll be a worthless piece of paper,
Yes.
because like John Adams said, it's for moral and religious people.
Mm-hmm.
And I would present to you that if we had the morality of Satanism, humanism, you can forget it. And there's no, in fact, I would say we're so behind the eight ball to make a prediction now of what we need to do, what this organization needs to do. I would predict that if, in the Sodomites, they plan this very carefully. They're doing this step by step. And what is one of their ultimate steps? It's to legalize child sex.
Yes.
And because, why? Because Marquis de Sade, their standard bearer, he could look at Christianity and say, oh, they say that incest is bad. Oh, okay, I'm going to commit incest. Because Sodom, his side would say that those are called taboos. So the job of a Marquis de Sade was to break all the taboos. And so that is one of the cultural foundations of the Sodomite movement, to break all the taboos. Because I read in their own, on the NAMBLA site, and they actually produced their own magazine. It was a magazine by molesters and for molesters. I tracked it, it was 16 pages when I tracked it down. And in their own writings, they said that they could never be free. Sodomites will never be free until children are free. So what does that mean? That they can, the English translation of that is that you can walk down the street with your child, and a sodomite can come up and say, I want him, and I want him now. And the legal powers, they will be able to get away with that, because our legal powers will be structured so much. Even now in Canada, but it's approaching here, there have been parents who have, their child will go to school, and their child will be told, like a girl who says, in this actual case, I like to play basketball with my dad and go fishing with my dad. And so the counselor says, well, maybe you're really a boy. And so they start the process immediately of bringing that child into gender reassignment. And so then when the parents say, no, that's not going to happen, what happens is that the powers that be, this bureaucratic structure, goes to court, and they obtain legalization to take that child away from the parents.
Yeah.
So they've gotten strong enough to be able to accomplish that. And can you imagine if the Democrats were elected, if Biden wins, they've got it right here, right now. So I mentioned that as a possibility. I mentioned that as a possibility because we can't look to the Supreme Court. If you looked at recent decisions, Gorsuch and Kavanaugh, they will betray us. If there were, let's say that Clarence Thomas was still there and Alito was still there, and there was a child legalization sex case came up, which they will couch, the Sodomites will put it as the civil rights of the child. We want to protect the civil rights of the child to do what they like to do. Such as this young girl, she has a civil right if she wants to be gender reassigned. And anybody who gets in the way is violating her civil rights. Just like sodomite marriage was a civil rights case. So they're going to go through that route as one of many things they can do. It's a child's right to change their sex. It's a child's right to have sex with whoever they like, whenever they like. So that it'll be a case which works its way up. If it went through today, I would predict you'd get a 7-2 vote in favor of the sodomites, because Kavanaugh and Gorsuch, as one clue, he goes. I didn't know this until later, but his pastor is a female pastor in an Episcopal church, and the Episcopal dominations have totally supported. They're like this with the sodomites. Pro sodomite, pro abortion. They go poo on the Bible. So Episcopals, there's some straggling Episcopals who are carrying on, but the Episcopal superstructure has been evaporated. So we can't rely on like, oh, the Supreme Court will overturn abortion or whatever. It's not going to happen. So we have to build a cultural groundswell on the streets like our enemies do, to be able to think unconventionally. We have to have guerrilla warfare, per se, in a sense. Because our enemies will say, well, the Christians would never do that, because they'll sit in their churches and they won't do anything.
Mm-hmm.
And that's their expectation. They're counting on it.
Yeah.
So that's why we have to think we have to be differently. We have to be, and I'm kind of, my apologies for being wordy here, but there was in the Rocky movie series, in one of the Rocky movies, he's kind of a plotting guy and plunges along, and then he gets the tar knocked out of him by another guy. So his Apollo Creed, the guy he defeats, he trains Rocky and says, okay, you have to do this completely differently. And so then Rocky comes back and eventually beats the guy who beat him. But he's moving and jabbing, he's doing a completely different way of fighting. So that's why I would present to you that we need to do a completely different way of fighting. Otherwise, we're going to be defeated because our enemies, they plan on knowing our game moves, that they won't do this. There's no way they're going to do this. Okay? So with this march, this challenging them, this bringing out blackgenocide.org and turning this white superiority thing like a martial arts move, we turn it on them. You want to talk about white superiority? Okay, you guys are the foundations of it. You believe in Planned Parenthood, you're a white supremacist. So we can use this to destroy them. And they can listen to me right now, and I hope they are, and you won't do a damn thing about it, because the same, I used it in this example. I showed it to a friend the other day that, how do you catch a monkey? Do you know how they catch a monkey? And so essentially, for those of you who don't, they put food in a jar, and the monkey goes up and he reaches into the jar, he grabs the food, but when he makes a fist to hold the food, he can't hold it. And so all you need to do is pick up the jar and carry the monkey away. But the monkey has so tied onto that food, they can't let go of it. So they'll be carried off to their death or whatever. So that's how you get rid of the monkeys. So the same thing, well, I can talk to the Democratic Party right now because they are totally supportive of sodomites' death. They're a death culture. They can't get rid of it. You're going to hang on to that, and that's how we're going to destroy you. Because I don't have it with me right now, but this program that I'm talking about goes way beyond our march. The day after the march, we can prepare for the November elections, which is where I would need your help. Because there's a radio ad which I produced. It's a public service announcement by the National Straight Pride Coalition. The idea is to praise all across the country. Public service announcement which says, dear citizen, our children are being taught increasingly these evil conditions, so you need to ask every candidate for office, from dog catcher to president, the following two questions. One, do you support teaching children that the pathology of gender fluidity is normal, natural, healthy, or sane? Insane, our motto. Yes or no? Number two, do you support teaching children that the pathology of transgenderism is normal, natural, healthy, or sane? Insane? Yes or no? By their answers to those two questions, you will know whether a political person is going to attack or defend your children.
Amen.
Very simple, very straightforward. If we spread that commercial across the country, and we get people on record, like the Democrats who are listening to me right now, they will hold on to that fruit in the jar, because they cannot say that those things are wrong.
And
They're totally incapable. They might try to weasel around it and say, well, and instead of saying yes, no, they'll give you a 1,000-word answer, which avoids any culpability. Well, we want to treat all people equally, and we have to have fairness and diversity, blah, 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 blah. The question. So when they answer that, it will tie them in. And that way we can carry them off and throw them in the trash. So that's the attack plan. So we will need to raise funds to reach out and put these on commercials across the country. So this is on stations across the country. And so we can color the election and color the enemies of humanity by bringing it out and lifting up with a rock that they're hiding under, shining a light, and then they can't get away from the lights. What do? We can step on them. Finish them off. So this is a war plan. This is a war plan, an attack plan. There's a gentleman, Mr. Timothy Gordon, down in Bakersfield, who was a Catholic teacher who was fired, and I don't have his book yet. It's called Rules for Reprobates. Another, if you've ever heard of Saul Alinsky.
Yes. Rules for Radicals.
Yes, Rules for Radicals was his book, and I'll say that he was the champion of what I call the rodents, our enemies. It was to teach the rodents how to defeat us. And so Alinsky, like Hillary Clinton, was a devotee of Saul Alinsky. So Rules for Reprobates is the reverse, how to teach us how to win. And so we can win this battle, but we have to become a war machine. And I haven't even read the book yet, but I've just heard Mr. Gordon speak. One of the ideas is the best, you attack. You don't stop attacking. You attack 24/7, on and on and on, and hammer them. So this is part of that whole idea. So to the degree that you can join us, this is a war for humanity. It's a war for our standard bearer. It's a very comprehensive war, a long war, but it can be defeated. We can shatter these people. They think they're undefeatable. They put up an aura that they're unbeatable, but they can be stopped, and we can do that. Our modest group, we can do that. So part of this is that we just need to build an infrastructure, just like they do. If you go to they have 1,000 groups for everything under the sun. And so we need to form an infrastructure of finance. We need to raise finance. We need to open bank accounts. We need to open, like sound equipment. We're going to have speakers on the phone for that day. So we need to be able to have sound equipment for people to be able to hear them articulately. And also we need bullhorns for our side. And so there's a ton of work to do, but it's a battle which it's winnable and it's worth it. Because there's countless people we can stop, especially generations of children who'll be shattered, but we'll stop that. Yes.
Amen.
No, it's not a question. Do you know that the United Kingdom is having a backlash about parents who have the sex of their children, their little kids, changed? And now there's a big backlash against that. I just it was on the news. And, you know, a most unlikely person, the author of Harry Potter.
Yes.
Oh, yes, the
Oh,
woman.
yes.
Who I don't like. I think it's a satanic thing. Anyhow, she is now
Yes.
on that side.
Yes.
She's writing a most unlikely person.
Yes.
But so you know, it's
I had heard that too.
the war or the battle isn't lost.
Right.
There are
Amen.
some very encouraging signs in different
Amen.
places, popping up some most unlikely places.
Amen.
Yeah, and so the lady you're speaking of, her name is J.K. Rowling.
That's
Yes.
She wrote the Harry Potter books, and she came out and said that there, I forget how she phrased it, but essentially that men can't have babies.
Right.
Something like that. And so she was immediately attacked as bigoted. And even the star of that movie, Daniel Radcliffe,
Yes.
who is Harry Potter, he came out and attacked her.
Wow.
He's on the side of the rodents. But she's holding her. But she was attacked, waves of attack. But she's strong enough to be able to resist it. But she's still being outcast by the we call it the Hollywood community or whatever.
Sure.
But so there is resistance. Classically, she would have folded by now. Classically in our culture, if somebody comes out and says something, they get nuclear bombed, and then they come out the same day, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't realize that my comments would hurt so many people.
All the
That's the
time.
last thing I wanted to do, and please forgive me, and blah, blah, blah.
But she hasn't done
Yes,
that at all.
yes, I was thinking. Candace Owens.
Yes.
Who she is?
Very
Well,
good.
I know
Oh,
who
yes.
she is, but I didn't know that she folded.
Kicked off some kind of network or something because she stated that only men can have babies.
Oh, yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
right,
yeah.
right. No, she hasn't folded. Yeah.
So she hasn't folded.
No, she's very strong.
Oh, I said that wrong.
Yeah.
That's okay. She's very strong.
know what
Yes.
you
Yeah. But that's another classic example of social engineering.
Yes.
We're being trained to think that if we say men can't have babies, that's bigoted. When it's insanity, total insanity. But we're being trained, we're being hammered on and on and on, to where people can actually think that statement They can say, oh, yeah, men can have babies, and that's supposed to be totally acceptable. No, that is a sign of sickness. It's insanity.
Yeah.
And so we have to be able to reinforce that and say, I mean, we have to call, that's why part of our motto, normal, natural, healthy, sane. We stand for sanity. Our opponents don't. So we have to uplift those banners. Those are common cultural rubric of pride.
Mm-hmm.
We're just saying that these are the foundational values of our culture. And we can use the word pride to get on the battlefield. It allows us entry into the brains of our opponents. Because otherwise, if we say, well, we're going to have a love seminar, but if we say we're having a pride parade, then we automatically opened up our bug goes into their head.
Oh, yeah.
And we're marching.
Their alarms went
we're
off.
marching through their brains. And so that's exactly, we want to put like the Death Star in the Star Wars.
Yeah.
We want to fly in and put a bomb and boom. Did you have any thoughts, comments? Anyone have any?
Yeah, Pastor.
I have a few comments. I don't know
Awesome.
that I want this necessarily on the internet because I want this to be to the Christian community alone. But I guess if the majority,
It's up to you.
Yeah, we'll just take the risk because I don't want to expose any of our warfare. I'm going to disagree with one thing that Don said today.
Okay.
He referred to the Marquis de Sade as a gentleman,
Oh, I did. Oh.
and I would disagree.
I didn't realize it.
That's funny.
Just teasing. But,
That's
yeah,
funny.
Yeah. I would say two things. Number one, God never works through a majority. He works David through Gideon's army.
Yep.
And so there's more power on our side than there is on the other. And the gates of hell will not prevail against his church. And the gates are a passive imagery, and so we have to march. I would say that's number one. The other thing that I would argue is that there's another dimension that I think would be worthy of mentioning, and that is a recent Supreme Court decision where the homosexuals have been granted the same rights as blacks in terms of the civil rights, which has completely crossed the line.
Yes.
To constitutional rights are granted by our Creator God. And nobody's asking the question, where does God give those rights? But here's my concern about that status now. Say that the homosexual activity is a crime that is worthy of death. The church now, any conservative church that has that message, is going to be seen as on par with the Ku Klux Klan.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is the corner they've got us painted into. That decision, in my mind, made the Church of Christ don pointy white hats and white robes. And so this is where they're going to go with this, and we are in the crosshairs now, legally in America. It's a frightening position. This is not at all what our founding fathers had in mind, and we've got a lot of ground to regain. And so I just think that's a new dimension to this whole debate that is worthy of.
And Gorsuch and Kavanaugh voted with where they're going to vote later.
Yeah, that's the new flank. See, yes. I'm saying the army's over there. Let's not get blindsided by this. You have to be aware of that.
And they have their constant warfare. One thing that they're planning on, and you'll hear Biden say that one of the first things they're going to do if he's elected is they're going to pass what's called the Equality Act. And the Equality Act, I forget essentially the ramifications of would it be if Pastor McCann, if somebody, let's say that you have a church and somebody comes in, Joe, and he says, I'm really Josephine, and you say, well, you're incompatible with our church, sorry, and then they sue you. It just allows legal attacks throughout our society for this pathology in countless extra different ways. And they're going to go right after the churches with this. They're going to go after the big churches to make an example of them.
Oh, they don't have to.
Yeah, so-
They've
so-
already made an example out of
So
themselves.
Josephine-
It's not
Josephine
good.
Can do that, and especially the social workers. I've got a friend who's a social worker, and the lady relates that the test that she's taking, all the questions for the test, because they're weeding out opponents like us, and they only want social workers who accept the so-called LGBT terminology. So the scenarios that I mentioned are like they're teaching in the test questions of how you should, what's the proper answer to a test question of what the parent should do if their son or daughter says I'm homosexual, transgender, fill in the blank. It's to nurture them and understand them and to appreciate their diversity and be tolerant. Not to tell them, son or daughter, you take a shower, you'll wake up, you'll snap out of it, or get some sleep. Don't listen to your stupid friends. You're a boy. That's the end of it. You're not the opposite. You're not a third, fourth, or fifth type of person. So stop this nonsense right now. So that would be the bigoted parent. But instead, the entire culture, these are social workers, and where does that come from? It comes from the board, who made the test, and all the elites in that field who control the board. So you have a fantastic bureaucratic structure in our society, which is spreading this poison through to poison our whole society, so that if your child does go to a therapist, that therapist has been trained to think a certain way. And they will have to do that. Just like if you go to a medical doctor and say, I have COVID-19. Well, here, take this drug. If they don't do that, that's called standard of care. If they don't do that, if they say, you got to go to a sauna, you got to heat up your body, get your immune system going, take some vitamin C, A, E, get your vitamin D up, that is not standard of care, and they can be yanked. They can be whacked by their own fellows who say, this is fraudulent health care. So you can't have your license. You're advising these patients, which is not standard of care, so you can have your license yanked. And so anybody who doesn't obey, if they must think in the box. A therapist or a doctor would have to say, hey, let's step outside for a second, I'll tell you. Come over to my house, I'll have some other stuff. They can't. They have to do it on the sly, because we're all being trained and socially engineered and indoctrinated to obey. And we must obey, or else you'll get fired from your job for saying all lives matter, or fill in the blank if you oppose the sodomites in any possible way. So that net is, like you mentioned, it's closing. And all these Lilliputian ideas, the little ropes which end up tying us all down because we've been sleeping. So this is a battle on the streets, literally. And it might not seem much, 2 hours in front of Planned Parenthood. But we're challenging the power structure of the city. We're challenging all these clowns. And we're making a stand and a statement. So that's why it's extremely important. We just do the best we can. We ask for the Creator's guidance and His blessing, that He brings us victory in whatever way He desires. But in preparation for that, if we take flyers like this to all the churches and just spread them like Johnny and Jane Appleseed, give them to your friends. I've got 2,000 black and white flyers. I've only got 40 colors, because I don't have 500 million like Black Lives Matter to buy all the colors I want. But I've got 2,000 black and white flyers. So whatever you want to take today, you're welcome to take. We'll get thousands more, whatever we need. And
Don, along those lines, just a question for you. The battle is focused on the sodomites. The battle is focused on those that are in rebellion. I'm wondering what's the likelihood that we're going to make significant inroads as we confront those people direct? What's happened with the abortion? I mean, you've been at the abortion clinics for years.
Yeah, and we've broken it down. And abortion clinics are closing all over the nation
I hope
because
so.
of organizations that did this 30 years ago,
But
like
so
Operation
often
Rescue. I know you're on here, Troy Newman, and God bless you for your work.
Yeah.
And
so
God
often
bless
you've
the
got
rest.
churches that have an 11th commandment, which is tolerance.
Right.
we have congregations that are, in fact, when I was at the city council meeting and I spoke up,
Yes.
you would be surprised at how many people identified themselves as Christians
Yes.
and then blasted us for being a hate group.
Right.
Yeah, false
There's
church.
confusion, there's fear, there's uncertainty among
You're
the
right.
congregation. We have two pastors today in this group, and
Yeah,
I would like to ask,
absolutely.
what can we do to bring the churches to a greater level of commitment to standing firm? Because really, yes, we can march. We are few, and we can do that. But the real battle is for the hearts, minds, and the people that identify as Christians and yet don't make decisions in accordance with God's
Right.
word. So what are we doing to do that? And is the means that we are using alienating those people?
See, the problem with the church is also that the church, unfortunately, is largely pro-abortion. They're largely sodomite. That's a big deal.
And in that sense, I would present that it's a duty that we have.
Yes.
It's an uncomfortable duty that we have. It's nevertheless necessary that there have been churches. I've seen the videos they went on, and they rattled on how they were talking about to their gay friends, and we accept you just how you are.
Yes.
And there's nothing wrong with you. So we have to come right out, and in my view, and say that is fake. That you, Joe Pastor, who did that, you are not a Christian pastor.
Right.
And that can be uncomfortable for us, because they'll come back, just like at that meeting where there were countless people who said, I'm Christian, and I totally support tolerance, diversity, and these haters.
Right. Right.
So we have to say, no, we represent true Christianity, and you do not. So, and now, how far that will get us? Probably not very far, because you have people, these pastors, who either monetarily, they've decided that they aren't going to survive monetarily unless they accept anti-Christian teachings.
That's it.
So it's more the bucks
That's all it's about,
which
Larry.
motivates them. But they aren't going to admit that. You could boil them in oil, run them over with a Mack truck, and that's the last thing they're going to admit. So it's something where we have to make a stand and allow the Creator to break their hearts. But if we start to melt it all, well, if we start to fade, then that will justify they'll say, it will justify them. We have to show up a mirror up to them and say, what you're saying is anti-Christian.
Amen.
What you just said is anti-Christian. No matter what you say, it's fake. You are not a Christian. Use one example.
Do.
We'll have Matthew, who will probably speak, Melinda's adopted son, who will say up and down how Christian he is when he is a fake. And true love, this is, again, an aspect of love. What is love? It's telling the truth.
Truth.
If I have my son, I'm going to tell my son the truth. No, you're not a girl. Take a shower, go to bed.
Right.
I'm not going to cultivate him. So, oh, that's your real. Oh, we'll cultivate your real. Oh, you really are.
Truth is not a matter of feelings or
Right.
consensus. Truth is truth. It's
Yes.
evaluated. It's
Yes.
measured. It's confirmed. The churches among the pastors, number one, and that then in the
Yes.
congregations to empower, to clarify.
But part of that unconventional warfare to our nation, because
Yeah.
including entire church denominations like Methodists and all that, who are taking sodomite priests and all that, whatever. So we have to be able to say that is anti-Christian.
Right.
That's all there is to it. Bottom line, we don't have tolerance. I don't have tolerance for cancer. I don't appreciate cancer as a diversity of the human condition.
Absolutely.
Cancer is a pathology. It will be defeated. But I'm not going to say, well, I'm tolerant of cancer, and if it's here, we'll play around with it. No. We call it cancer for what it is, and we defeat it. So in the same way we have to have unconventional warfare, we'll be speaking the truth, which we've all been socially engineered to shut. We don't want people saying, you're a hater.
Right.
You jerk. You're a Klansman. You fill in the blank. And no. You guys, everything that you do, you're the haters. So we have to be able to stand up to that hailstorm, that nuclear bomb that is thrown at us to stop us.
Pastor.
Because they want to neutralize us. So no, that's part of where we grow with our Creator. Strength to say no, even when there's 1,000 people who oppose us. When we go to our demonstration, we'll probably. I'm planning on our side can potentially have fantastically bigger numbers this year than we did last year. And frankly, I don't know how many people showed up last year because it was a sea of ourselves and the rodents and the police and all. It was hard to tell. But I anticipate that we're going to have far greater numbers. Now, how many of our enemy will show up? It depends on their tactics. I've already sent this flyer to one big cheese of our enemies. And so they can plan on how to attack us. They can try to ignore us, which is probably, because I worded this in such a way, it'd be very difficult for them. I told this particular person, are you going to call us racist when we're here defending blacks against 20 million killed? How are you going to do that? And, well, you're a good liar, so I know you're up to the task. You're an excellent liar. So if anybody's up to the task, it's you. So how are they going to do that? One of the things they can do is just ignore us. So that's
They won't do that. They'll portray us as haters. They'll portray us as supremacists. They'll portray us all of these lies.
Christ as a drunkard.
What's that, Pastor?
I think that if you're in a church that is weak or has compromised, that I think we have an obligation to go lovingly and see if we can win him.
Yes.
I'm hoping it's a him.
Right.
That if we can win them to the case.
Yes.
If we can't, my counsel would be get out of that church.
Amen.
And go get with Joshua and Caleb in the land, and you want to be with the two that the minority side, and you say we will live or die by what God says.
Thank you,
and
Pastor
who
Bush.
cares what is the popular opinion?
Doesn't matter.
So churches with faith. Funding, things like that. So we need to congregate around faithful churches, and if 80% of the church goes the way and joins them, that's to be expected.
Yes.
Of course.
But I'd rather be with Joshua and Caleb.
God and I are majority.
And you're looking at the Joshuas and Calebs.
Yeah,
really.
and the battle is won really in God's, for
It's the
God's
Lord's.
glory, and in God's way, using God's methods.
Amen.
Not refute truth. They can hide it, they can attack it, they can spin it, but they can never destroy it.
You know what I was noticing as you were talking is that the things that you're describing go all the way back to the apostles.
Yes.
I mean, they were
I was
facing
thinking that
those
too.
very same things,
Sure.
and even from religious people. You know, those
Always.
who wanted to say, that if you can't be Christian unless you're circumcised, in other words, was condemning and trying to get rid of the message of the gospel. And when somebody comes into the church and says, I am such and so, whatever, it's not wrong to say, you're certainly welcome to attend here, but this is what the gospel says. And,
Thank you for saying that.
yeah.
Because I wonder if we do have gay people that come to the church. We want God to change their life.
Pastor
Yeah.
Bush,
Definitely.
can we let Pastor Bush answer that, because he's had that opportunity if a gay person came in, they wanted to just listen, attend, maybe learn,
Sure.
what would you say to them?
Well, yeah, that we're all sinners saved by grace.
That's right.
There's a distinction that I think, Greg Bonson got me on board, and I'm just immensely grateful. There's a difference between the sin of homosexuality and the crime of homosexuality.
Yes.
And we don't condemn the sin so much as the
crime.
And the crime happens when the sin is in full recognition and militant. And and it is in your face. It's a social plague. And so if somebody is experimenting and they're looking for answers, we need to help them to understand this is a forgivable sin.
Yes.
But it cannot continue a habitual. When it gets to the point where the activity is subversive to society rather than just one of the areas of sin, then that's where it becomes the cancer that has to be cut out. And the most loving thing we can do, is say you are not safe with God. So we want them to come to our church, but we will not let them destroy the church.
Amen.
Yes. And that would be a common thing which they'll expect throughout culture.
Yes.
Be it whatever cultural institution, school, whatever, but they come to the church and say, I'm Joe Sodomite, I'm here, can I come to your church? Sure. And then they start to dictate, well, I don't agree with that teaching, you need to stop it. And so they start to change the church according to what they want.
Yeah.
So their equivalent, essentially, what their whole life is dedicated, or their whole existence, not life, is dedicated to say, I tell God what to do, He doesn't tell me what to do. Right. So when they walk into the church, they repeat the same thing. I tell you guys what to do, so I'm comfortable. If I'm uncomfortable, there's something wrong with you, not me.
And the loving thing is an accurate diagnosis of their
Right.
sin, and the solution for that sin, which is through the church, through the gospel, God's love. We are not haters.
Right.
We are
Not at all.
absolute vessels of God's love, and we need to be that to all of them. So when we're misrepresented as haters,
ridiculous.
that our love overwhelms that and is the thing that people see. That's how they see God within us.
Well, we're the only people who love them enough to tell them the truth.
That's right.
People who don't love them enough, like if your son, you tell him, stop eating that cookie. I want more cookies. I don't care what you think.
Yeah.
I'm going to have more cookies. Okay, go ahead, hog down. So, does the father love the child enough, or does the father, when his real love is say no? So he can say yes occasionally, but real fathers will say, the mass majority, no, stop that, don't do that, stop, no. And so that's the love of the child. When the child says, I'm going to hold my breath, and so go ahead. So the real father will have love in the same way. When we have this hailstorm of the sodomites attacking us, we say they are essentially broken children, broken adults, broken children who have grown into adult size. So we say, no, we're the only people who have enough love to tell you, you are broken. And we know how to unbreak you. We know the solution of how you can be healed. Despite all your holding your breath, it doesn't matter how long you hold your breath. We tell you the truth, and that's all there is to it. Now, it's your choice whether you want to take it or not. But we're the only people. So we're the only people who have enough love. You're the haters, because
Why would you hate God who loves you supremely?
Yes.
That's the key.
Can I maybe add, I think a really wonderful tactic in addressing this was, I just saw recently a YouTube video with Ravi
Pastor,
Zacharias.
if we could just, if we could keep that thought, just to say.
Okay, we're just going to say goodbye to our friends. Goodbye, Pastor McCann. Goodbye, Mrs. McCann. God bless you. Thank you for joining us. Blessings. We'll see you next time.
He wants to get a picture with Biden's bread.
He's got it. We got it. Okay, and then we'll go back to your thought in a second. Would you hold this, Gary, for me? Dave, and then we'll get right back to that.
However many you like. If you like more, yeah, you don't have to put it on.
Ravi Zacharias' approach is exactly the right one because he reasons.
Yeah, have you seen that where he kind of gives you the three-pronged?
I have not.
Yeah, it's just, it's a, something that we all need to get to. Pastor, I haven't met you, but anyhow, I appreciate what I heard. And Orthodox Presbyterian Church up in Sonoma, California.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, everyone on Facebook world, sorry about this. We're just a little break here and saying goodbye to one of our pastor friends, and then we'll pick it up here in a couple seconds. Okay. Pastor David, Pastor McCann. God bless you. Thank you, sir. Okay, okay, Dave, you were back to it. Let's go back to it.
Just recently saw a.
That's good.
Is that? Yeah. Okay.
Okay, go ahead.
So
I'm sorry,
I just
Dave.
recently saw a YouTube video. I want to commend it to you if you want to chase it out. If you want the link, I'll pass it to you. But Ravi Zacharias was in a college setting, and there was kind of this, antagonistic question that was asked to him about homosexuality, and how could he say that it was wrong? And so he broke it down into, well, he says, I'd be happy to answer the question, do I believe it's wrong? But you need to understand something. As I see it, there are three ways that we can address right and wrong. And he said there's theonomy, and that is theos nomos, that it is God who determines what law is, that we live by his law, what he says we do. A second level would be that you have, I forget how he said it, but basically it's an oligarchy, that it's ruled by a few. Law comes by a few who are in power, and they dictate policy. And he gave the imams in Islam as the example of that. And then he said, and then there is autonomy. Now, my analysis is really two, because the imams in Islam are still autonomous, right? They just have a couple that agree with them that are in power. But it's really theonomy or autonomy, as Van Til said. But when he said autonomy is where we make law for ourselves. So we have these three. Now, if it's not theonomy, if you don't agree with theonomy, and you don't agree with the, I forget the term he used for the rule by few. It's not an oligarchy, but he didn't use that word. But heteronomy, I think, is how he said it. He said, now, if you embrace autonomy, I want you to ask yourself the question, if the individual gets to determine law for himself, how are you going to, as I answer your question, are you going to give me the right to define law for myself if you're going to define law for yourself?
Good.
And that just completely defeated it. It was just a brilliant way of breaking it down to saying that you're upset with me, but the only way you can be upset with me is if you really embrace my standard of theonomy. There is an objective standard that binds both of us. If you're going to be a law unto yourself, then you can't argue against me. The best thing you can do is just shut your mouth. And we have the high ground, right? So that's... It was
That's
just really,
right.
it was just,
That's very
It's worth
good.
chasing down if you want to hear it in history.
Okay.
And it's not based upon hatred.
No.
It's based upon really an objective standard, which is God's standard.
That's right.
Yes.
And God is the ultimate source of love.
That's right. He's our
And so it's
he's
been
our
totally
creator.
misrepresented.
Yeah, he's their creator. He's my creator. We both are accountable to this God. It's not I'm trying to make you do what I want.
Right.
There's a lot of things God says that, quite frankly, I've had to change my whole life about.
Right.
It may not have been your particular sin, but I've got my own bag of sins that I need to change. So, anyhow, there you go. That was my 2 cents.
Awesome.
Okay.
Well, any thoughts, questions, ideas? Yes.
Yeah, on your S's, I come up with another S.
To add for it, standing for Christian family values under the Straight Pride event. Just some thoughts or input.
I like that for the next flyer.
Well, part of it, devil's advocate, but I'm thinking that part of it is covered by Christianity. Part of it is that even though there's tons of wording on it, let me think about that, because part of the person who designed this was very. He said you can get too much, clutter everything up. So let me think about that. Thanks for your input.
Now be quiet.
Don't never talk again.
Well, what we can do, the word values, it's not here. I think it's implied, but we can. Thinking, the word values somehow to put that in there. But thanks.
I think it softens things up just a little bit and appeals to a few more people.
Well, I don't know that they would. I don't know that it would appeal to people necessarily because
I don't think
I
it
think
would at all.
the nature of the
No.
the nature of the flyer to Christian people, they would see this. There's so many obstacles to that they would say they would have a negative reaction to it, even Christian people.
Oh yeah.
Because they have their own social engineering they're dealing with. They have, and they won't even say, when it says here, join us to celebrate Christianity, they won't even get down that far. I would say a lot of people will be caught up in the pride idea.
Yeah, I know. That's it.
It will.
Well, remember last year, the first and main contention was with Western civilization. How dare we? How dare we celebrate Western civilization in our wonderful country?
Just that's what made us automatically into racist.
Yeah. Remember? That's what.
We were, and that was where Christy Au, who I sent that note to you, I told you about. She came right out of the block. So that's.
And it's important that we engage and not alienate, those churches, those church people and so forth. Anyway,
I would hope to engage them. Maybe I'm too much of a Joe pessimist. That to me, a lot of churches will. It'll be a tough battle.
Yeah. Well, Don, remember, I think I know I've said this before, but out of 222 churches that Ron and myself and Kit Harrington, a woman that's passed on, visited in 1990, out of 222 churches, only 77 of them even agreed with us back then in 1990 on the life issue alone.
Right.
Now we've added the sodomy issue.
30 years
we
later.
have less than 30 churches in this town that would say they even agree with this, no matter how you phrase it, because they've already accepted sodomy. And some of the larger churches, which I used to attend, I have a dear friend who's now close to 80, and he was asked to leave because he only spoke to the issue in the middle of the street with friends, he thought, and was turned over to the pastor. He said to the pastor, according to the Word of God, aren't I allowed to know who my 3 accusers are, and aren't I allowed to go to them and try to make peace? And they said, absolutely not, but you do need to leave the church. We've had it with you, and you're kind. Yeah.
Yeah. So they sterilize, the churches have been changed into businesses.
I know.
And
Makes
so
me cry.
they are more concerned with, I think it's pennies and pulpits or something like
Yeah,
that. Afraid
Dave
I've
said
heard
it. Finances.
More concerned with the finances. So
Yeah.
the Creator's
Or
word
the numbers.
is out the door. Yeah.
Or
numbers.
both. Yeah, now that, mind you, that church was very supportive. In 1990, they let, not Ron and I only, speak to the congregation. We went to every single Sunday school class, right? You were in the
I was there.
30s
Yeah.
Marrieds with us. And the 30s Marrieds consisted of about 400 people, a couple hundred people in 20s. It was a very big, vibrant church. And the pastor was, he was absolutely fearless of men. And we had Dr. Jerry Falwell here, as a matter of fact. And the last time we had Falwell, and there were sodomites out front and cross-dressers and snipers on the roof, people went through the roof, and that was the last time we had Dr. Jerry Falwell, who was a regular to our church. And it's really, really sad. But that church now boasts of having sodomites in the service, and they literally act out during the service.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and when those passages come up in Scripture that deal with these issues, they're literally skipped over with no apology and no recognition. Just, we read so far, we hit these topics, we move on.
And what does Jesus say about being ashamed of me?
Yeah, he will be ashamed of them, no question. But my point being,
Yeah,
it's sad as it is.
Of course.
We have lost, and we now no longer have those wonderful 77 churches. We might have 30 churches that even want to be faithful. Of those, we have those pastors that have literally said to me, I'm afraid. I'm afraid. And I understand, because frankly, I'm afraid. And then I wake up that morning and it's time to go to the abortion mill, and I go anyway. You know?
And then that's that's part of the comprehensive collapse of our social engineering. In fact, one of the subdivisions of everything, it says we're going to celebrate everything that we have on our flyer. Reverend Peterson, he mentioned it last year. He mentions that he has a radio and TV broadcast out of Los Angeles. He'll mention it again this year, I'm sure, is that one of the problems is the collapse of men in the country.
Yes.
And we're producing, like, to me, our school system are beta factories. And so one of Reverend Peterson's comments is he'll be talking to some guy and say, beta! And so a beta, a collapse, in my term, I call it men. You have the Creator made men. But when we're socially engineered and accept the lives of the enemies, we can be downgraded to male, a sub inferior man. Because we support things like sodomy and homosexuality and abortion and all that. So we can be inferior men, or the equivalent of a beta. So because a man would not.
True.
Yes. So that's part of our mission is that we need to reestablish men.
Yeah.
And we can have pride per se in just being in or support of being men. And help our beta males to snap out of it and become not so much alphas, but just become men again.
Yeah. Confident in the word and the will of God.
Yes.
Amen.
And so in that sense, Satanism/humanism is part of that beta factory machinery, which when you can invade someone's mind with those belief systems, even when they don't realize it, you can reprogram them and they'll go on and do your bidding. Do the bidding of the enemy of God. So that's when these things here, heterosexuality, even heterosexuality, you'll hear the term, it's derogatory. Well, you're just cis-normative. So they're saying that two genders are there's something wrong with this two genders. Anybody again who says that there's only two genders, that's banned. You can't say that. There's 3, 4, 5, whatever. They go way
Man,
beyond
woman,
that.
and confused.
That's
Confused.
So, but the rodents want to mass produce the confused, and they teach us all this normal. So everything that it says here, we're celebrating heterosexuality, we're celebrating masculinity, femininity, babies born and unborn, Western civilization, our wonderful country. How many times have I heard in the media lately that people who say positive comments about our country, they're attacked? Oh, you're a racist. You're everybody is a racist who supports America, and Christianity itself is automatically under attack. So we're supporting all the things which are culturally under attack by our enemies, and so it's a big, fantastic job. So, but it's winnable. We can do it. So that's why I'm glad you were here today. That thank you for coming, and I'll see you all on the 29th. Well, hopefully we can have a meeting
perfect.
Because we're maybe 2 weeks from today,
Sure.
2 weeks after that. Because
2 weeks from today
there's
is
so
good.
much to do, and
Okay.
flyers. If you want to take
Anyone
flyers
wants
with
to
you.
join us 2 weeks from today, contact me and be part of excellence and proclaiming truth to the nations. Thank you. Bye-bye.